Morning, this is Ben. I want to respond to this video by Satanic International, God is bullshit. And we've got 6 points that I was able to pick out. Anyway, the first one, he was talking about the age of the universe, I guess, and 6-day creation story in the Bible, and how that's scientifically proven wrong and so forth. And just make a few points about this in a response. One, the consensus that he seems to think exists among Christians on the interpretation of these passages does not exist. There was a bit of a consensus for a while, but you know, if you go back earlier on in the Christian faith, there was not one, and there's not one today. Part of the issue is, you know, there's these days in Genesis 1, and how do we know how long they are? Or are they, you know, literal days, or what's going on here in these kinds of things? And then if you skip on to Genesis 2, a second account starts that takes up the rest. You know, there's basically two parts of the story. There's this first Genesis 1 through like 1:1 through 2:3, and then 2:4 through the rest of the book. And the first part is like, you know, the creation. Then the second part's like, it says the generations of the heavens and the earth. In other words, what happened with the people. That's what that would mean, the stories of the people, the generations. But Genesis 2:4 in the English Standard Version, for example, where it says, "These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens." And so this odd thing here is that all of a sudden all those 6 days are referred to as one day. And it's not that abnormal in English. You know, we'll say the day of the horse and the buggy, the day of so-and-so, you know, the day of hand washing clothes, the day of drawing water on the, you know, this kind of thing. But in you know, I would just to summarize this, I would say that the interpretation of the Genesis narratives here has been debated far longer than anyone's been debating science. And I don't think, you know, we can just pick and choose whatever we want, but you know, the debate's been going on much longer. And as far as scientific proof, again, science is based on inductive. It's not again in this video, but I've said it a million times before. Science is not based on real proof, but rather a practical way of saying, hey, this is hard to disprove, so let's just act like it's true. So anyway, we'll move on to the next point. God is nothing but an imaginary friend for adults. Here I found, you know, maybe it's just some sort of bare assertion, but you know, that doesn't make much sense. I don't see, I could assert that, you know, I have $1 million hidden inside my foot. You know, you can just assert whatever, but it seemed, but because of the terminology, it seemed like he was saying basically that people believe in God because it makes them feel good, you know, because, you know, their imaginary friend that they like to have. And in this case, what we have is irrelevance. That doesn't have anything to do with whether or not God exists. In other words, let me give an example. If I was to balance my bank account, you know, at the end of each month, and let's say I did it at the end of this month, and I came out, you know, $1,000 ahead, you know, $1,000 profit, so that, you know, I was able to save $1,000. And you would say to me, how did you come to that conclusion? I'll say, you know, on the basis of the basic, you know, mathematical understanding of addition and subtraction. And then would you say to me that, well, you like having $1,000, so therefore I'm not going to believe in you know, the basic laws of addition and subtraction? Okay? No, because whether or not I like it is irrelevant to the truthfulness of the claims. Another example of it, I mean, it just doesn't have anything to do with it. You know, it is what it is, and it doesn't matter if I like or don't like the outcome. Furthermore, there are plenty of, you know, people may like not believing in God. And again, it's just irrelevant whether or not people like it or don't like it. The question is there really a God or not? Because people can like not believing in God, and they can like believing in God, and we know both to be true. I mean, they may like not having a big brother look over their shoulder. They may like not having to put up with someone who, you know, knows what they think and tells them what they should do. They may like not having that kind of authority in their life. So, it's irrelevant. Alright, and then this question, who made the universe, and an answer, it doesn't matter. I failed to understand what he meant by this, because it would seem like one of the most horribly important things ever, you know. Because who would make, you know, if we answer this question of origin for the entire universe, then we've answered so many questions, like what is the purpose of human existence, what are the things we should do, you know, and how should we live, and what should we do with our lives, because there is a purposer, there is someone who created us with a purpose in mind, the whole universe, and it answers questions of destiny. I mean, if we know the question of origin, then, you know, the origins of the universe and all things, then we can answer questions of meaning, morality, purpose, destiny, and security, and all sorts of questions. So anyway, or at least we have a starting point, or at least we would know who has the answers. And in fact, it's relevant for some of these points. In other words, if you can grant that God created the universe, then let's take his next point. The Bible's full of stories that can be scientifically proven and beyond any doubt to be fake. Now, stop right there. I disagree with that. You can't scientifically prove something beyond any doubt. You know, there are so many scientific laws, like the law of gravity was based on things that we took for 100% certain, but with Einstein's theory of general relativity, we were able to demonstrate that the basic fundamental concepts of acceleration and motion that the forces like gravity and Newton's relativity were based on were shown to be wrong. And this is what science does. It just makes a guess, and it says we had a hard time proving this wrong, so let's just act like it's true, but it doesn't mean that we actually know it's true. But anyway, he says, for example, of scientifically proven to be wrong, the ark story is too miraculous. You know, it's my summary, but he's saying, you know, Moses couldn't have got all those animals on that boat. And again, if God made the universe, that's relevant, because if God can make the universe, then the ark story is possible. In other words, it seems like what you're setting up for us is, you know, the ark story did not happen, or the Noah and the ark story was all done by Noah. Okay, and I want to introduce a third option here. God and Noah did the ark story. If that's the case, and if God was assisting what happened, ta-da, ta-da, you know, all of a sudden, you know, if you grant that God made the universe, then it's not too big a fish to swallow. If you can, you know, if you can swallow that other fish. So the question is, you know, who made the universe? Unless, you know, there could be other points that could be made, but, you know, based on this one point that Noah couldn't have got all those animals on the ark and that kind of thing. I mean, if God made the universe, I don't have any trouble with believing that too. Alright, Christians are picking and choosing what they want to take literal. You know, he was referencing this story that Christians don't want to take the ark story literally. And he defined that there's a progression here. That, you know, he says they can't do that anymore because science is no longer in its infancy, or as he said, you know, he's saying it's still infant, but not as infant. He says everything is going to be proven to be, you know, wrong, and that's all that's going to be left is, you know, almost nothing except, you know, a book full of dumb stuff. And this progression, I would want to point out that it simply does not correlate. The swinging from literal to non-literal interpretations of the Bible does not correlate directly with the, you know, the progress of science. They don't meet up. In fact, if you go back to, say, the second century after the writing of the New Testament, Origen believed the entire Old Testament to be non-literal and it's simply like a metaphor for what went on in the New Testament. Now, obviously, since he lived so close to the New Testament, it would have been much harder for him to say that was non-literal, but he claimed the entire Old Testament was non-literal. The other Christians disagree with him, but the point is, there are lots of things that, you know, in the past there were lots of stuff that was taken non-literally, and then today there's lots of stuff that's taken literally in the face of science. For example, the existence of Babylon was something that everyone said was dumb, and you know, the Bible and these other ancient texts that claimed it exists, it was just some mythological thing they believed in. But then they found it, and Saddam Hussein made a big deal about it, and put his face on the money next to Nebuchadnezzar, you know, and claimed that he was bringing back, you know, the greatness of Babylon in Iraq. Things like this. Why are you even making this video if people don't take the Bible literally anymore and they throw stuff out? The bottom line is, this progression where science is slowly hacking away does not, you know, it's not there. The facts aren't there. And then the final point, religions are made to give hope to the masses of suffering poor people and keep them from uprising. Things like, those who suffer now will reign in heaven. Again, this is only looking at some facts, not all. This is just picking and choosing the facts to support a certain view of religion, when in reality, many are told to lose things on this earth for Jesus. In other words, there are a lot of people who, you know, were commanded to cease to be rich, to cease to have what they needed. Take, for example, you know, in the New Testament, Paul. Here was a man who was rich, powerful, and ta-da, if he wants to believe in Jesus, he has to give that up. While on the other hand, there were many people who were poor. And they were promised, you know, wonderful things because of Christ. And the bottom line is, Christianity was an underground religion in the Roman Empire, and one of the main reasons it grew is because it accepted everyone. Unlike, you know, other views, you know, whoever wanted to believe in Jesus could be a Christian. And they took in all sorts, and that was one of their main reasons they grew so much, even though it was illegal to follow, you know, because, in other words, if you didn't make sacrifices to the Roman gods, then, you know, that was a crime punishable by death. And Christians, you know, their basic belief said, you know, you couldn't sacrifice to the Roman gods and go through that worship service and that kind of thing. And so it was an illegal religion. Now sometimes there were a lot of different groups that would do that and break that law of sacrificing to Roman gods. But sometimes persecutions would rise up and say, let's get rid of these Christians. And this church grew through that precisely because it accepted everyone. It was not a way of controlling the masses. In fact, it was the masses doing something that the powers that be wanted them not to do. But it grew anyway. Now, the main factors that people found persuasive, there was a willingness to die for their testimony about Jesus, or martyrdom. In other words, the word martus, witness. And this was common among Christians, that people were just amazed that you would be willing to die for this Jesus. And that doesn't seem to fit with this whole, oh, it'll make your life great, because there were people who had a lot of this worldly stuff to lose, or slash gain if they, you know, if they turn. And on the flip side, there were a lot of the other thing that was really persuasive. There were a lot of letters written by intellectually smart, rich people who put their lives on the line, and who wrote letters, sometimes even to the Roman government, trying to persuade them to stop putting Christians to death. And the intellectually wrought and pushed arguments were a big factor in the growth of the church. So it just doesn't line up with this whole idea that it was something made to control the poor and give them hope. That being said, thank you. Have a wonderful day.